Hi students, welcome to your next math lesson. We are in chapter 6, looking at lesson 8, properties of multiplication. Students will be able to learn the properties of multiplication. So hopefully you've heard of this before. These properties also work with addition, but we're going to focus today on using them for multiplication. So first up is the identity property of multiplication. And this states that the product of any factor and 1 is that other factor. In other words, a number such as 5 times 1 will always give you the number that's not 1. Okay? So we could see this in 5 times 1 equals 5. We could see this in 0.2 times 1 equals 0.2. Remember, 0.2 is read as 0 and 2/10 times 1 equals 0 and 2/10. So any number times 1 is that other number. And there is an exception, and that exception is 0, because any number times 0 is 0. Okay, so any number that's not 0 times 1 is that other number. That is called the identity property. The commutative property. I like to call this one the flip-flop property. So in multiplication and addition, this means that you can reverse the order of your factors and you get the same product. In other words, 2 times 4 equals 8. Well, I could flip-flop these factors, reverse the order, and I would still get 8. 4 times 2 also equals 8. So 2 times 4 is 8, and 4 times 2 equals 8 as well. The commutative property allows me to change the order of factors, and that won't affect my answer. And lastly, the associative property of multiplication. This property refers to grouping in multiplication, and it also works for addition as well. So this property says that you can group numbers differently in multiplication and still get the same product. So I can group 1 times 2 together and multiply it by 3. Let's figure that out. Remember, things in parentheses would go first. 1 times 2 is 2, and 2 times 3 equals 6. Well, let's change that grouping. Now I'm going to group the 2 and the 3 together. And let's see what happens. So all I did there was move the parentheses to the second 2 factors. Well, parentheses would go first. 2 times 3 equals 6, and 6 times 1 is still 6. So the associative property tells me that I can regroup numbers that are multiplied together, and I get the same answer. Now, you might see a combination of these properties. For example, in the associative example, I used the identity property because I multiplied by 1. All right? So I'm going to give you some number sentences, and I want you to think about which property I'm highlighting. Okay, and your options are the identity property, the commutative property, or the associative property. All right, here's our first one. Okay, so let's take a close look at this. I do have an equal sign. This is an equation. So I want to study what's on one side of my equal sign. I have 5 1/10 times 3. What's on the other side of my equal sign? Oopsie, nothing right now. On this side, I have 3 times 5 1/10. Wait a minute, I think I heard those numbers before, and that's because they are the same numbers. On my left, I have 5.1 times 3, and on my right, I have 3 times 5.1. So I used the same factors, and I reversed the order. So when you reverse the order, when you flip-flop the order, which property is that? Identity, commutative, or associative? That's the commutative property. All right, the commutative property is when you can rearrange the factors in a different order and the answer would stay the same. Here's a little trick to remember the commutative property. When you drive somewhere, that's called a commute. So I live in Pottstown and I work in Norristown. Now, with the pandemic, I'm not driving anywhere. I'm not driving to work and back. I'm teaching from Pottstown. But normally, I would wake up in the morning and I would drive to Norristown. And it's actually about 20 miles. And then after school's over, I get back in my car and I drive home to Pottstown, which is still about 20 miles. So that is my commute. My drive to work and my drive back home from work. You can see that for me to go to work and come home, I flip-flop or I reverse the order. And that's what the commutative property does. You flip-flop your digits in multiplication, you reverse the order. This is my commute. And it's similar to the commutative property. All right, let's look at another example. All right, so for this example, I have 4 1/10 times 6 grouped together times 3. And that's going to equal the same amount as 4 1/10 times the product of 6 and 3. So which property am I showing you? Yep, I'm showing you the associative property. That means that the grouping is different, but our answer, our product will be the same. So here I've grouped my first two factors together, and here I've grouped the second two factors together. That's the associative property. And as I say every year, please do not abbreviate the associative property. Be careful there. How can we remember this? Who you associate with is who you hang out with. So I have friends from high school that I might still hang out with or associate with. I also have friends from college that I hang out with or associate with. I have all my work friends that I hang out or associate with. And then I have other friends that I hang out or associate with. So think of this grouping as who you hang out with, okay? And in the end, they're all your friends. So because my grouping changed does not mean that I'm not friends with the other people. It's a nice little trick to remember that one. All right, let's do one more. I'm going to challenge you on this one. All right, study that one and see what you think. Pause the video if you need to. Okay, so trick question. I used all 3 properties here. What? Yes, I did. You can see the identity property is showing up because I have a number multiplied by 1. So that's the identity property. 4 times 1 is going to give me 4. I also have the a commutative property because I've rearranged the order of some of my factors. I'm using a 4, a 1, and a 6 in both sides of my equation, but I flip-flopped the 4 and the 1. So I've changed the order of some of my factors. That would be the commutative property. And then I've also gone ahead and changed the grouping Here I grouped 4 and 1. Here I grouped 4 and 6. Now, no matter what, I'm going to get the same product, and I'm going to prove it to you. 4 times 1 is 4, and 4 times that 6 is 24. Over here, 4 times 6 is 24, times that 1 is still 24. So 24 is equal to 24. So I used all three properties, the identity property, timesing by 1. I used the commutative property when I rearranged the 1 and 4 and flipped that order. And I used the associative property when I regrouped the 4 and 1 with the 4 and 6. All right. So hopefully you found this helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye.